Now we move to Marjorie Taylor Greene and a truly ridiculous, bonkers, horrible, other terms, interview Marjorie Greene did with Maria Bartiromo. We just looked at Alina Abba on this show. Then she also brought Marjorie Taylor Greene and Byron Donalds on to discuss the third indictment of Donald Trump. And I know Marjorie Greene is always saying deranged, detached from reality things, but she tries her best to hit new lows as often as possible. And that's what I have here for you. Take a look.
Bidenomics is failing America. People can hardly afford gas. They can hardly afford groceries.
So quickly, we'll look at what she's saying about Bidenomics. I'll try to quickly address what she's saying, but then we'll get to the part of her declaring that we're in communism now.
Bidenomics is failing America. People can hardly afford gas. They can hardly afford groceries. And many seniors on a fixed income are choosing between paying rent and being able to buy their medications. People are drowning in inflation, and America's
drowning,
failing under Bidenomics. They have no policies to run on. The only thing they can run on is to continue smearing President Trump's name. And I just want to follow up and say,
okay, so let's pause there. Then we'll get to her just going fully off the rails. But it's interesting that she would bring up seniors having to choose between certain costs and their prescription drug costs and their medical expenses, because she actively fought the legislation that Biden successfully got through to lower the prescription drug costs of Medicare recipients being seniors. He is attempting to solve that problem. Marjorie Greene and her group is actively trying to prevent those solutions from being implemented. And it was Republicans that were able to successfully get out of the Democrats' agenda, out of the legislation they were trying to implement, capping the cost of insulin for all Americans at $35 out of pocket per month. They did get it successfully for Medicare recipients because it was more budgetary, and so they could do it through the reconciliation process, but they would have needed Republicans not to oppose it to get it through for all Americans. And Republicans, of course, did gut that out of the bill. And so Marjorie Greene is bringing up problems that she actively assists in making worse and keeping the same, even though Biden was successfully able to help Medicare recipients there along with Democrats. And then on the Bidenomics point, it's as if they have collective amnesia now about the moment that Biden took over as president, and that the world, all of the world, experienced a bunch of problems based on the economic downturn that the pandemic caused. And getting out of a downturn like that was going to cause ramifications that were going to be negative for years. But then to look at the way that the United States handled that recovery versus other countries, and when you look at our economy versus other comparable economies and realize, holy smokes, yes, we were in a tough time. Yes, people were hurting. It's not downplaying the pain. It was bad. Then you look at what Biden did to try to assist and help us get out of that. Far from perfect, all the normal caveats, you know. I wish he did some things differently, and I wish he was better in certain areas. But when you just compare him versus the alternative, Donald Trump, he got in initially American Rescue Plan, creating millions of jobs. He's overseen an economic recovery completely stunning, better than other comparable economies. Now we have inflation down to 3%, the last numbers, if I'm not mistaken, which is lower than other G7 countries. Unemployment back to historic lows after it shooting up, and all these different metrics that are going in the right direction. GDP growth back on track, wages back on the upswing. And so to look at all of that and say Bidenomics is not working is to ignore the stunning recovery that Biden oversaw. It's not that he created everything good that happened during that time, obviously not, but it's to say if you're going to attack him for the economic reality, you have to note that we had a historic recovery, better than other countries, absolutely stunning, and still there's a lot of pain, but Trump would not have made that any better. Okay, continuing.
Maria, the more times they indict President Trump, the more people realize that the Biden administration is a communist regime. And for the first time, Americans are actually seeing what communism really looks like. And we have to stand up up to this. This is why Republicans in the House, when we come back in September, we have to vote for an impeachment inquiry because it's the right thing to do. Whether Joe Biden took $5 to his name for corrupt business deals or whether he took $40 million, it does not matter. It's up to Republicans to do the right thing and not allow the Department of Justice to win the 2024 presidential election for Joe Biden.
We're in communism, guys. This is it. Look around. You now know what it feels like to live in a communist country. It's such nonsense. Now, there's two ways to look at this. The first is actual communism, like the definition of communism, which obviously we don't have public ownership of the means of production. So that doesn't make any sense. But she more means it like similar to communist regimes we've seen that were referred to as communist, so we think of as communist. Fair. Are we anything like those authoritarians she might be referring to, or I don't even know what she's thinking of? No, not at all. Trump being held accountable legally is actually us proving that we have a better functioning system than other countries, because even people who are wealthy, well-connected, and powerful, at least in this situation, are being held accountable for their potential violations of the law. That's how this system should work. That's how it is working, and that is good. It proves the opposite point. But apparently, according to a congresswoman, we are now experiencing communism. You might as well just call us the Soviet Union. Then here is Byron Donalds.
Must occur. Listen, the Democrats wish they had this kind of information on Donald Trump. Congress never had this kind of information on Richard Nixon. If you can't begin an impeachment,
You're talking about they're talking about the bribery accusations against Biden and saying they wish they had this on Richard Nixon. I'll show you why this is so absurd in a moment.
Impeachment inquiry with this much damning evidence and financial track records and detail, then I don't know what Congress is doing. I believe we're going to start that inquiry when we get back.
What a moment. Byron Donalds is saying we have more evidence than they had on Richard Nixon. We have so much evidence, it's time to talk about impeachment. Interesting, because the guy who is leading the investigation, or currently is leading the investigation in the House of Representatives, the Republican that you take orders from, who is supposed to be the one uncovering all this evidence, recently said this.
Yes or no? Do you believe that this is now officially the Joe Biden bribery allegation? And do you believe that you will be able to prove that? Jim Comer.
I sure hope so.
Quote, I sure hope so. I sure hope so. I sure hope. Do you know what those words mean, Byron Donalds and Republicans? It means he hasn't been able to prove it yet. He hopes he'll be able to prove it for some reason. He hopes he'll be able to prove bribery accusations that aren't substantiated, but he hasn't yet. And on the lower third, it says Devon Archer testimony could spell trouble for the Bidens. I mentioned in a past segment that I went through and was reading the transcript from this interview, and Devon Archer just assisted in brutally, whether he was trying to or not, just recounting the facts, dismantling the very narrative that House Republicans are pushing. The person they called in to blow the lid off of all this, when he would get asked directly or indirectly about all of the key points of Republicans' narrative, he would have to explain or answer to the effect of, not substantiated. That's not accurate. He doesn't have any evidence of any of these accusations. It's wild. They see all of that and go, we have more than they had on Nixon, and we have more than they have on Trump. Yeah, okay. Thank you so much for watching. If you want to be a part of what makes this show possible, plus get access to the full video version of the show hours before all the clips are able to be uploaded to the YouTube channel, plus get the bonus show on the weekends, you can do so by going to lukebeasleyshow.com/membership. That's lukebeasleyshow.com/membership, and there's a link in the description.